Welcome to 99th Monkey Liberty News for Monday, July 21st, 2014. I hope everyone had a pleasant weekend and didn't sweat too much about what's going on in the world. Of course, the joy of the Lord is our strength, and perfect love casts out all fear. So we don't need to be in constant turmoil about the constant turmoil. We can process things and pray about things and have hope for the future. This morning, of course, I'm going to give some attention to MH17. And the first article that I have is from Zero Hedge. And I just want to mention that Zero Hedge is on this. I find it to be, other than InfoWars, the website that has the best information on this situation and the perspective that I happen to agree with. Russia says it has photos of Ukraine deploying BUK missiles in the east, radar proof of warplanes in MH17 vicinity. So, of course, what we're being fed in the American media is that Russia's the bad guy, and they're really pushing that. And, of course, it's very likely that there's a false flag here with this plane. And over the weekend, I remembered a episode of Sherlock in which, it's actually my favorite episode, Scandal in Belgravia, because it's interesting because there is a sex scandal in Great Britain along with this almost a side story of a plane filled with dead bodies that is intended to be used in a false flag operation. So we're living in a Sherlock episode, and I think it's important to remember just the false flag aspect of all this, and the fact that virtually all recent wars were begun with some kind of a false flag, or at least America entered. That was our cue, some kind of a false flag operation. Of course, the underlying issues, as with virtually all wars, are economic. And this is a response, I believe, but this is a crucial aspect of what is going on with Russia, between Russia and the West. Putin makes first official statement, Russia to cut IBM Microsoft dependence. Complete Ukraine situation summary. And the tagline here is your one stop to catch up on all the latest developments surrounding the crash of flight MH17 and the recovery effort. So here Putin is making a statement that Russia is going to cut IBM and Microsoft dependence. Well, them's economic fighting words. These mega corporations don't want anybody to find out that the world or any part of the world can get along well without them. And of course, the major economic issue is the BRICS plan to become political alliance to reform the international financial system. And the R in BRICS, of course, is Russia. And Russia is one of the real movers of this plan. And this has been steadily going forward. Last week, the BRICS Bank was funded to the tune of $100 billion. And there's real potential here for BRICS to be effective in ending world dependence on the petrodollar. And through that, bringing down potentially the Federal Reserve banking system. So this is what the real center of all of this, of course, once again, is economic. And I have an article here from the Activist Post, which contains a video of Hillary Clinton. The title here is "Hillary Tells EU to Use MH17 Tragedy to Find Alternatives to Gazprom." And Gazprom is the dollar-dumping gas giant. And from this is how Activist Post phrased this. Now the agenda is starting to make a bit more sense. Hillary Clinton doesn't want a good crisis to go to waste. She told Charlie Rose that her recommendation to the European Union is to take advantage of the shutdown MH17 tragedy to immediately accelerate efforts to find alternatives to Gazprom. And Gazprom is one of the big energy companies that is ceasing the use of the dollar as their currency, the currency that is a bridge between two countries to, any kind of contract. So again, they're dumping the dollar, and that's what this is really about. Moscow-based Gazprom is the largest producer of natural gas in the world and one of the globe's largest companies. A few weeks back, on June 26th, they announced that they would settle contracts with China using yuan or rubles instead of dollars. Now, as Americans, we might feel threatened by this, the cessation of the use of the dollar. It will definitely mean financial change. It will mean that we as Americans no longer have an unfair financial advantage over the rest of the world. And there will be some adjustments required. But this is, and our military has been used for many years to prop up the Federal Reserve and the use of Federal Reserve dollars as international exchange currency. And yes, we have benefited, but at the same time, we have been slaves to the Federal Reserve. And now it's becoming increasingly obvious that the Federal Reserve System has no more love for Americans than it has for any group of slaves anywhere on the earth whose destinies they have held in their hands. And it will benefit Americans to have the Federal Reserve banking system go down. And yes, we will have some time of adjustment. Yes, there probably will be struggles. But hey, if you were a slave escaping from slavery, you would have to go through some struggles as well. The freedom is worth it. One side aspect of all this is that I have a feeling that there is intent to paint Americans who recognize the false flag, who recognize that this issue has to do with economics, not Russia being the bad guy, are going to be targets, or there's probably a plan to make us targets, to call us un-American, pinko, commie, whatever, which is really ironic because America is heading so quickly in the direction of socialism. And that what people who see these economic issues really want is the restoration of the United States constitutional republic, at least those who understand the issues and are aware of all that. So I think it's important for all of us to be aware that as we speak out, hey, Russia might not have shot that plane down. There are other issues here. This is about BRICS. This is about financial reform. We may not find ourselves very popular people, and this could well be used as an excuse. I mean, if You know, if there are enough people left around who lived through the Cold War and feared the Russians, which I happen to have been one, they might be swept along and, you know, buy back into this thing that, yeah, Russia's the bad guy. We really have to be afraid, be very afraid. I remember being taught how to hide under desks in the 3rd grade because Russia might drop a bomb on us. And I spent many nauseous hours watching videos about what nuclear weapons can do. So we really, in my generation, the baby boomers, we were effectively brainwashed. And through trauma-based mind control, we were shown these videos of bombs dropping and then told how dangerous and scary Russia is. Well, I'm not under that mind control anymore, and hopefully enough Americans have broken free of that so that we can objectively evaluate what's going on here. I think that the cabal, the social engineers, have failed to make us continue to be afraid of the big bad Muslim, and so now, you know, they're reverting back to this Russia, or who knows, maybe that was the plan all along. I don't claim to understand the machinations of their minds, and I really don't want to. Another interesting bit of news that came out over the weekend is this new Neil Keenan update. And I don't follow Neil Keenan extremely closely, and I don't always make mention of his videos, but these two seem really pretty interesting to me. Neil Keenan update, and there's part 1 and part 2. So altogether here you have about a little over a 20-minute investment of time. And again, he talks about some really interesting things. One of the people he mentions is Karen Hudis, and I found this interesting, and the fact that he's so neutral about all this. I mean, he doesn't get all emotional or anything. It's I appreciated this perspective, so I'm sharing these videos. And this is a YouTube video that I learned of through Cynthia McKinney. Israel accused of war crimes, and this is the UK Parliament, the House of Commons, holding a debate about whether or not they should impose sanctions on Israel because of what's being done to Palestine. And again, I appreciate the objectivity here. And Americans are practically rabid, American Christians, if you start to talk about Israel, you know, the possibility of not giving complete a stamp of approval to everything Israel does. And I remember the time when this vibe began to come, and it's not so much that I remember people saying a whole lot about it. It really was more of a vibe back in the, I don't know, maybe mid to late 80s, maybe early 90s even, just this sense that you're not a true Christian, you're not you don't really love God unless you love Israel enough to want a lot of deaths to happen to defend Israel. And there are a lot of ideas here. I actually realized how deep the stronghold is, and how strong the stronghold is, when I was thinking about this yesterday, thinking about some issues, some things I had read, processing some things, and I began to almost feel a little guilty about not wanting to support Israel. And I just realized that's absurd. That is a demonic stronghold, or maybe, leave out the word demonic. It's just a thought stronghold. it's actually probably more mind control, something that Christians have been fed in a way that we would accept these ideas that no matter what Israel does, we have to be on their side. Well, no, we don't. Is this Israel of the Bible? And I don't really want to get into that whole issue right now, because I don't want to make this too long. But I hope that we can all just objectively look at what's going on. And once again, I think this, along with the Russia issue, could be used to really divide us and to cause Christians who have embraced the liberty movement and the truth movement and find our news through the alternative news, that we would be pitted against the more mainstream, mainline Christians who are still watching the news, still believing that Israel can do no wrong. And, ultimately, the most important thing is probably for us all to not surrender our principles, but to extend hands to people with whom we disagree and make an effort to find common ground and peacefully explain why we believe as we do. And the UK seems to be on it right now. Their parliament is talking about Israel, issues with Israel overstepping what really is right as far as bombing Palestine. They are exposing their pedophiles, and at least ostensibly they're beginning to bring them to justice. And here, another Zero Hedge article, market manipulation probe escalates, UK opens criminal investigation into FX rigging. So, again, it appears that there are some people in England who want justice and who are, there seems to be a real passion for justice there. In America, we have a lot of people who talk about having a passion for justice, but we haven't made any real huge leaps toward justice at this point. So I'm hoping that wherever we find ourselves, it can begin to translate into justice being done in the U.S. And when I think about where we are, I really can't help but think about Lord of the Rings as with BRICS and other forces, the rest of the world becoming more free and having more justice, and the U.S., the place that used to be the seat, what we used to think of as a place of justice and liberty for all. I can't help but think about the end of Lord of the Rings, where on a large scale throughout their world, evil had been dealt with effectively, but back in the Shire, Saruman had snuck in, and the Shire, which was always the place of peace and safety, was now the seat of probably the worst evil that was existing at that time in that world. Yes, it's a fictional account. I realize that, but as Stephen King said, or wrote actually, fiction is the truth inside a lie. And there is a great truth there. With the Shire, with the hobbits coming back and finding the Shire overtaken by evil. And that has happened to America. And we, like those hobbits, are going to have to address the evil so that we can also live in peace and safety. And I'm closing with this today. It's not precisely good news, but I found this very helpful. And this is Alex's entire show, but I have it queued up to the part that I found really significant. Alex, in this segment, and it's not all that long, described the different forces, the part that Russia's playing, the part that China's playing, the part the U.S. is playing, in the EU, the rest of the West. And it's brilliant. It's a brilliant breakdown. It's very concise. It's very easy to understand, and it's just very helpful to listen and be able to get a better handle on what's going on. So I decided that I would share that in the hopes that it is as helpful to you as it was to me. Thank you for tuning in for today's 99th Monkey Liberty News. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. Hoping that you will love one another, take care, that in your life perfect love will cast out all fear, and that you will insist on liberty by enforcing the Bill of Rights.